This is the CineSnob Podcast.
Hey there, welcome to episode 284 of the CineSnob Podcast. I'm Jerrod Kingery.
I'm Cody Villafana.
Cody, we're in the midst of another winter event here in Texas.
Yes.
No ice yet, but it's just cold as shit outside. So
Yeah, maybe some ice tomorrow, as it's being reported. But yeah, bad memories of of a few years ago and everything that happened
last
back
year.
then.
Yeah.
And hopefully that doesn't happen again.
Did you try to go to the grocery store or anything?
I did a HEB curbside this morning.
How'd that
But
go?
I didn't. It was fine, but I didn't. But like they were out of multiple things, and but I wasn't panic shopping. I promise. I was just like normal, everyday grocery shopping.
We have Randall's here, which is like an Albertsons company that everybody forgets about when stuff like this happens. So you can waltz into a Randall's and just get whatever you need. There's also an H Mart near our house, which everyone forgets. Everyone forgets about that too. So we tried HEB a couple years ago and it was bad. And then I was like, let's just go see what Randall's has going on. And it was as though nothing was happening.
That's nice.
Yeah, it was good times. Anyway, Cody, last week we had our big top 10 of 2023 show. And right after that, the nominations were released for the Houston Film Critics Society's annual awards, which, again, you and I are both a part of. Let's run down those those nominations.
Yeah.
What do you say? So we'll just start with Best Picture at the top. We have American Fiction, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, Barbie, The Color Purple, Godzilla -1, The Holdovers, Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer, Past Lives, and Poor Things. So right off the top, I see at least 6 of them that were on either your top 10 or my top 10 or both. I never actually did see Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, but I've seen that get a lot of buzz. Have you seen it?
I have. It's good. I think if I was making like a top 25, it may fall somewhere in between like 20 and 25. I do like that movie in particular will come up with another nomination a little bit later when you talk about it. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting pick. And I think, any pick, even, regardless of if it's something that I submitted or advocated for, I like when our organization goes outside the box on these things. So it was interesting to see that show up. And I know, for me, I think there was 4 of my top 10 were in the Best Picture nominees. And I think you had
I have 6.
6? Yeah.
So I've Godzilla -1, The Holdovers, Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer, Past Lives, and Poor Things.
Yeah. So not bad.
Yeah.
A movie that I think we're not going to talk about on here, but I think, did you watch American Fiction?
Yes.
Just didn't do it for me. I thought that the sort of like satire of it all was severely undercut by a pretty melodramatic, average story.
I like Jeffrey Wright in it a lot, and I like Jeffrey Wright in general. This one, the satire feels kind of lazy in a way, and I don't know that it quite ever really answers for itself. Like I was not aware. Like I never quite connected the dots as to what Issa Rae's character was doing. For example, I don't know. A lot of people seem to really like it. I like Jeffrey Wright in it. I don't really care for the movie.
Yeah.
Overall, I think it's got some good moments. I think it's got some really funny stuff. Like there's a scene at the beginning where Sterling K. Brown and Jeffrey Wright like yell at a passerby. That was really funny.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely some funny stuff. And by the way, anytime Jeffrey Wright is brought up, I always bring up there's a really funny Paul F. Tompkins Jeffrey Wright story. I don't know if you've ever heard it before.
I don't think I have.
I'll send it to you later. It's very, very funny.
And then the other one I wouldn't have put on there is, well, the one that I thought was just okay was The Color Purple.
I have not seen that.
It's a like a movie we'll talk about in a little bit. It's a musical remake, obviously, of the original film that made its way to the stage and then back to the screen. It tends to forget that it's a musical. I felt at times. I think there's some good performances in it, but it's weird because it'll go long stretches without being a musical, and It's basically just a remake of The Color Purple.
Hmm.
Let's move on to Best Director. We have Greta Gerwig for Barbie, Yorgos Lanthimos for Poor Things, Christopher Nolan for Oppenheimer, Alexander Payne for The Holdovers, and Martin Scorsese for Killers of the Flower Moon. I think I did nominate. I set my nomination at least in for 4 of those. I don't think I had Gerwig on there for Barbie.
I'm trying to think. I mean, I definitely had Celine's Song for Past Lives in there. Definitely had Payne. I definitely had Scorsese. Can't remember the other ones, but this is about what you would expect. I mean, I think these very well might be the 5 that are nominated for the Oscar. I think these feel like pretty strong choices here. No complaints. I mean, I sort of like my sort of lack of interest in Oppenheimer notwithstanding, Nolan is definitely a worthy nominee. So
I feel like we talk about like Lifetime Achievement Awards from time to time. I don't think this is one of them, but I think it's one of those. He's due for it.
Yeah.
I mean, a huge critical and commercial a huge critical and commercially successful director like him. I mean, I would be totally fine with any of the other ones winning as well.
Yeah.
Moving on to Best Actor in a Leading Role, we have Leonardo DiCaprio in Killers of the Flower Moon, Paul Giamatti for The Holdovers, Cillian Murphy for Oppenheimer, Andrew Scott, All of Us Strangers, and Jeffrey Wright for American Fiction. Again, I'm fine with all of those. I think I really like Paul Giamatti in The Holdovers. I think it'll probably go to Cillian Murphy.
Yeah. Well, I think it's going to be a photo finish between those two. I'm personally very happy to see Andrew Scott in this. I really was heavily advocating for that performance. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is the only All of Us Strangers acknowledgement from our group. So I'm glad that at least, that movie is going to be represented, and I think represented with what I feel was the best performance of the year from where I'm standing. So, I think it is between Giamatti and Cillian Murphy. I would love to see Giamatti win, but we'll see.
Moving on, Best Actress in a Leading Role, Fantasia Barrino for The Color Purple, Lily Gladstone for Killers, Greta Lee for Past Lives, Margot Robbie for Barbie, and Emma Stone for Poor Things. I think this lined up exactly with my nominations.
Yeah, I definitely had 4 of the 5. I did not have Fantasia Barrino because I haven't seen The Color Purple, but
right.
But again, really happy to see Greta Lee in here for Past Lives. I feel like all of the acting is pretty spectacular. In that one, and I do feel like, again, I would have liked to see in a category we're coming up later of ensemble. Spoiler alert: Past Lives isn't there, but I would have loved to see Past Lives in that category. But 4 out of the 5 here for me for sure.
Yeah, and my pick personally is Emma Stone. I wouldn't be surprised for Lily Gladstone either. Yeah,
I mean, I think at this point, I think Emma Stone may have it wrapped up, but we'll see.
Yeah. They did split obviously last week with the Golden Globes. Not that necessarily carries any weight with the categories being split between drama and musical/comedy or whatever the hell they call it now. Best Actor Supporting Role, Robert De Niro for Killers, Robert Downey Jr. for Oppenheimer, Ryan Gosling for Barbie, Mark Ruffalo for Poor Things, and Dominic Sessa for The Holdovers. I definitely had the first 4 out of those. Dominic Sessa was not one I had in there, but I'm not dissatisfied with that.
Yeah, so I did nominate Dominic Sessa, and I am very happy to see that performance get recognized because I think, that movie, The Holdovers, doesn't work without his performance, I think. And so I really am glad to see that one pop up. I think I may have had one of the supporting actors from Past Lives in there. I can't quite remember my nominations, but I definitely had Sessa. This one, again, seems to be a 2-horse race with Gosling and Robert Downey Jr. right now. And then a little bit of the Charles Melton performance from May December has a lot of buzz behind it, but it's really hard to get a gauge of like how much of a threat that movie is right now. Because I mean, I don't think it popped up at all on our critics group list, but I know a lot of people really like that movie and performance. So
yeah. Let's move on to Best Actress Supporting Role. Emily Blunt for Oppenheimer, Danielle Brooks for The Color Purple, Rachel McAdams for Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, Rosamund Pike for Saltburn, and Divine Joy Randolph for The Holdovers. My pick was Randolph for The Holdovers.
I do think that is the one like total sweep of the year where normally we see a certain acting performance just sweep everything, and including like the Oscars, the Critics' Choice Awards, the critics groups. I do think that Divine Joy Randolph performance is maybe the shoe-in of the year at this point, especially because that category is not the strongest. Even looking at these, like it is. I mean, I love the performance from Rosamund Pike and Saltburn, but I feel like that's like nobody's really acknowledging that one. So, an interesting thing there.
Yeah, let's move on. Best Screenplay, American Fiction, Barbie, The Holdovers, Oppenheimer, Past Lives, and Poor Things. This is a tough one for me. I know. I think Past Lives is probably the most writerly of all of these, followed up very closely by The Holdovers.
Yeah, and I will be interesting to see. So again, for our critics group, we combined adapted and original, so it's just best screenplay across the board. My fear is that this goes to American Fiction, and I really don't. I mean, again, I don't think that script is all that great. I would love to see Past Lives, The Holdovers win. I would be okay with Barbie or Poor Things as well, but those would be my top two.
Did you see, by the way, earlier this week? I think it was this week. Judd Apatow getting upset that Barbie was nominated for a adapted screenplay as though it were somehow less worthy.
Well, not only that, but it going for original was solely because that's an easier award to win.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Anyway, let's move on. Best Animated Film, Boy and the Heron, Nimona, Robot Dreams, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem. I mean, I think Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse should easily walk away with this. I could see The Boy and the Heron sneaking in there.
I mean, The Boy and the Heron is going to be really interesting to see if it plays spoiler, because it was a bona fide hit in the United States. I mean, it made a lot of money here. It was number one at the box office when it came out. So I will be interested to see that. Did you get to Robot Dreams? Did you watch that?
I haven't yet. No, I haven't. I have the screener still, but I haven't. That's one that's on my list still to get to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool to see that in there. I think it's pretty decent, but I think this should go to Across the Spider-Verse, but I wouldn't count out Miyazaki and Boy and the Heron.
Yeah. Best Cinematography, Barbie, Rodrigo Prieto. Also for Killers of the Flower Moon, Rodrigo Prieto. Oppenheimer, Van Hoytema. Poor Things, Robbie Ryan. Saltburn for Linus Sandgren. I mean, I think it goes to Oppenheimer. I would love to see Poor Things win this because it's just so interesting to look at.
Yeah, but I agree. I mean, I think Oppenheimer is the easy pick here. Poor Things is the most like creative of the bunch, and so it would be cool to see that. But yeah, I mean, I can't. It's one of those things where I feel like Oppenheimer's going to win the technical stuff pretty much across the board.
Yeah, I think so too. Moving on for Best Documentary Feature, American Symphony, Beyond Utopia, The Eternal Memory, still a Michael J. Fox movie, 20 Days in Mariupol. I abstained because I didn't see enough documentaries this year. I only saw those last two. I would assume Mariupol would be your pick, making the top 10.
Yeah, and Beyond Utopia was just hanging out outside of the top 10, so either one of those two. I haven't seen American Symphony all the way. I watched a few minutes of it, and when I was in my sort of, rush to the finish, and it didn't do too much for me, so I do need to finish it. I've seen the other two as well. Still is fine, and The Eternal Memory is more like sad than anything else. But yeah, Mariupol was my top pick. Don't have a lot of sort of hope for that. I feel like American Symphony is the easiest pick here, but we'll see.
All right, Best Foreign Language Feature, Anatomy of a Fall, Godzilla -1, Perfect Days, Society of the Snow, and The Zone of Interest. I didn't see Society of Snow or Perfect Days. I did see the other three, and I think all of them are great. It's weird that Anatomy of a Fall is foreign language, with I think the vast majority of it being English.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was disqualified from the Oscars, I believe, for having too much English in it.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say. I mean, I think it's between just with the zone of interest being, I think, a little bit of a split between how many people are like enjoying it versus like how many people are liking it but not having a good experience with it. I just kind of wonder if Anatomy of a Fall or Godzilla -1 takes this one, especially because Godzilla -1 pops up in Best Picture for us. So I'm wondering if that's the one that takes the cake, but we'll see.
I would put my money on Godzilla -1 winning this award from our group, just based on chatter I've seen across the months that this movie's been released. Okay, I'm going to skip a few down to Best Ensemble Cast.
Yeah.
And that's Barbie, The Holdovers, The Iron Claw, Killers of the Flower Moon, and Oppenheimer. Again, I didn't have The Iron Claw in there. I was lukewarm on that movie. But I think any of these others are great picks. I do agree with you that Past Lives would have made it in there. This was my kind of shot in the dark. It was Godzilla -1. Because that was one of my favorite elements of the movie, the kind of coming together of these four people.
Yeah.
And sort of becoming an ensemble piece there in the middle of the film until the end of it.
That's a good pick. My big push here was All of Us Strangers. I would have loved to have seen that, just because I think that all four performances in that movie are really good. And especially as they kind of, come together as well. So, yeah, I mean, I again, can't be too upset about this one. Interesting that certain things like Poor Things didn't pop up in this category as well. Considering the Mark Ruffalo performance that I think a lot of people are liking, and then smaller stuff by like Rami Youssef and Gerard Carmichael and
Willem Dafoe is really good.
Willem Dafoe, yeah. So yeah, I mean, this one I will be really interesting to see how it goes. I mean, I would think that Oppenheimer would probably be the pick here, but I could also see anything winning except for probably Iron Claw, just because it doesn't really pop up anywhere else.
Yeah. So that's kind of the big ones there. The awards will be given out on January 22nd in Houston, obviously. Don't know if I'll try to be able to make it this year. I always do consider trying, but it's tough. I believe that's on a Monday, so
a little tough,
a little rough for us working folk here that aren't in the Houston area. Anything else before we move on, Cody?
No, I think we can go ahead and move forward.
All right, let's get started on reviews.
Here are this week's reviews.
First up, we have Mean Girls.
May I have everyone's attention, please? We have a new student.
What's wrong, Kitty?
Are you trying to make the rest of us feel dumb?
I'm not trying to, it's just happening.
Dear God, woman.
Get in, loser.
Regina George is a scum-sucking life ruiner.
Why is he by our table? I can hear you, by the way.
Can you hear me now? We're gonna make her pay.
Girls are made deranged by what's called hormones. WHO.
What is going on?
Don't worry about it.
Dance break.
Why is this so tight?
I mean, you've had it since the 6th grade. You're probably maturing.
This is a remake of the 2004 film Mean Girls, but also an adaptation of the 2017 stage Broadway musical Mean Girls, which I don't think you've seen. I certainly haven't seen it.
No.
What is your take on Mean Girls right away? Were you a fan of it, the first one?
I was, yeah. I mean, it came out when I was in high school in 2004, and it was a movie where, I think a lot of people I should say, I was like a lot of people in that I was a big fan of Tina Fey back then, and this being a really big break for her, going outside of what people had known her for, writing this movie and yeah, I was a big fan of it. I thought it was extremely funny and really smart and really sharp. I watched it quite a bit growing up.
Yeah, we watched it. My niece, her 15th birthday, my sister rented a movie theater, and this is the movie that we watched. and like she knows the movie, which surprises me since it was from 5 years before she was born. Anyway, tell us about this new one and what you thought of it.
Yeah, so it is interesting to kind of talk about this movie because it is kind of a weird thing, right? So it is effectively an adaptation of a musical that was an adaptation of the movie, and it's hard to talk about it as its own thing because it is so like beat for beat the same movie, where it doesn't take a lot of artistic license with the story of it all. There's different character, small different character changes, or the cast is definitely more diverse than the original film. And then, of course, the big difference here is the addition of songs, because it is a musical and there are songs throughout. And so what you have here is Angourie Rice playing the Lindsay Lohan character of Katie in this. And, and again, like I could just recite the plot, but if you've seen Mean Girls, you know the plot. And it's the same exact thing. I mean, I can't stress enough how much of it is beat for beat the same thing. And, with these types of movies, we talk a lot about, do they have a reason to exist? We talk about this a lot with the live action Disney remakes. Do they justify their existence? And for this one, I don't know, because it is a really weird experience where like, clearly there's some jokes here that I feel like maybe were punch ups, like a job that Tina Fey could take a second crack at a joke or something like that, but there is so much of this movie that is so heavily reliant on like repeated dialogue from the first one, the same type of jokes. Tina Fey and Tim Meadows both play the same characters in this movie that they did in the original Mean Girls.
That's a really weird feeling watching the movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's really off-putting to me.
Well, especially delivering like literally the same lines of dialogue.
Right.
And like all of the big moments that sort of made Mean Girls what it was, like small little lines of dialogue or sort of memes that formed, are all present in here. And it just has like another coat of paint on it. And it's really hard to even call it a fresh coat of paint because it is so similar. And then you have the addition of these songs, which I don't know. I mean, I'm not a musical person, so I feel like I'm not the best judge about whether a song is like great or not, or fits. But for me, it sort of takes away a little bit from the sharpness of the original script, because I think the issue that I always have with musicals is that everything is sort of like very explicitly laid out in the lyrics of what's going on. So you're like eliminating the guesswork of what a character is feeling or thinking or doing, because they're singing what they're feeling or thinking or doing. And so you lose a little bit of like the incisive commentary that you might get through, just watching the movie as is through dialogue. I also feel the problem here is that when you're making a movie this close to the original, it's going to be really hard for people not to compare performances here and characterizations. And unfortunately for the cast here, it's most of these performances pale in comparison to the original. And again, it's nothing bad about what these performances are in this movie, but you're taking a pretty iconic, teen movie here, and you're giving the same dialogue, the same, mostly the same script. That comparison has to be invited. And I think, I think Angourie Rice does fine as Katie. I think, it pales in like the Regina George character really pales in comparison to what you get with Rachel McAdams. I mean, it's not even close. And again, I think, and again, this is not necessarily a slight to Renee Rapp, who plays Regina in this one, but it's just not the same. And I even think to some degree, like the Lacey Chabert character is also not the greatest comparison. I do think that the Janice character is maybe the closest you get to being like on par with what Lizzie Kaplan did with this one, but it's just all an inferior version of it. And so there's for this movie to succeed, I think that the songs have to be like showstoppers. And while I appreciate the sort of choreography that goes into everything, I think that there's like one or two good songs in this, and the rest are just kind of whatever. I don't love the introduction to like Regina and all of this. I don't love a lot of the scenes that follow. And also it feels like for a 2-hour movie, some of the narrative pieces are a little bit rushed. I think it kind of rushes the sort of setup of, Katie befriending Janice and Damien and then, deciding to spy. I think that's all really escalated quickly. I think that, Katie becoming part of the Mathletes is a little bit, really intense, like quickly gotten through. And of course, this is because you have to build in a bunch of songs. And so for me, I can't say that that it's like a terrible movie. I mean, especially in the first like 20 minutes or so, I laughed out loud multiple times. I think there's some really sharp, funny dialogue here. I like the little bits of cameos. You see a little bit of like John Hamm, who has like 2 scenes as the gym teacher and health coach or whatever. And I think he's, maximizes his time there. But ultimately at the end of the day, it comes down to, does this thing justify its existence? Is anyone going to grab this instead of the 2004 Mean Girls? And I think unless you're like a fan of musicals or a fan of these songs in particular, there's no reason to. This is just a different version of the same thing. And I think oddly feels like cash grabby when you start looking at it through that prism. So for me, I think it just doesn't quite get the job done.
It was originally supposed to be a Paramount Plus release, and it was bumped up to a theatrical release, which apparently was a successful move. I believe it opened up at the box office. I agree with all that you said. I think the biggest thing for me is that the songs just aren't great. Like if there were really, really killer songs in it, then I could see the justification of this thing existing. I think there are a few good songs. I think the song that introduces Katie's character is a good song. It has some interesting, an interesting look to it, like changing locations a few times. Whatever they did to poor Renee Rapp, I don't know. I don't know her music that well. I know she's a singer, but they turned those Regina George songs into just mushy, like the pop shit. Like you can't understand her half the time she's introduced. I don't know what the production on that was, but it sucks. I do think the Janice and Damien characters are probably the only thing that's maybe slightly upgraded a little bit. They sort of serve as narrators through this, which it just adds an interesting element to it. I think I do think Lizzie Kaplan was great. I think I don't know how you say her name, Ali Caravolo. Yeah. Cravholo. I'm sorry that I screwed that up. She played Moana. I'm sorry that I don't know how to pronounce her name. I think she does a really good job too. And I think that the script kind of fleshes her character out a little more, like explicitly as being LGBTQ, as opposed to just sort of hinting at it. That speaking of those like upgrades, I don't know that it all the way works grafting this 20-year-old story onto a world that has social media.
Yeah, it's very forced throughout, like a lot of like screen recording type stuff to show them on social media,
like
and
TikToks and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that because of that, it feels a little like out of time a little bit. Like it doesn't feel like it was done for anything other than to throw the songs in there. I don't feel like there's any sort of pulling this into the modern age at all, because it does have like, there are some elements like you talked about. It's more diverse. It's a little more spelled out in its representation. It changes words like slut to cow, which whatever. But I don't know that it really, again, like you said, justifies its existence as anything other than oh, here's a musical version of that movie that everyone loved.
Yeah. Well, and again, the big thing for me, and I'll say this one more time, is that in a movie like this, I think what the people who are making this, I assume, don't want is for people to make comparisons, and they want this thing to exist as its own thing. I think a lot of people, sometimes unfairly compare two things that are meant to be different. When you see something that is meant to be a fresh take reboot of a thing that's an established property. Maybe sometimes people make those comparisons a little bit too easily, but with this, it's so similar in almost every way to the original that, you know, you can't help but do it. You know, I mean, there are certain things that are like shot for shot the same, line for line the same. You know, you've got the same actors in it, you know? That's
the part that really, really like kind of shatters the whole thing for me. Like, same lines, fine. Same plot, fine. Tina Fey delivering the same lines she delivered 20 years ago in a superior movie in the same scenes. The same with Tim Meadows. One tiny twist to those two. It doesn't feel. It feels too much like fan service. It's not even the right kind of fan service. Like, there's a fan service thing in here that's what you would expect from a film like this.
Yeah.
Then there's that where they're playing the same roles, which doesn't make any sense. Well, I mean, sense is the wrong word, but it doesn't. It throws off your perception of this whole thing for me. And then my biggest complaint is they changed my favorite joke in the movie. Kevin's business card says something like public figure instead of badass MC.
Yeah.
I was so upset when I saw that, but
yeah, that whole mathletes thing I feel is like really done a disservice. I mean, I guess it's not a huge plot line in the original. Also, they changed the Christmas song.
It wasn't
Rockin' Around
the Christmas Tree. It was something generic or something.
Well, it was like a Christmas pole thing. I don't
it spelled out that it was going to be raunchy instead of just like,
yeah.
I don't know. That was a weird segment.
Rocking around the pole.
Yeah. And
like,
then
again, just weird stuff like that. Like, what's the whole point of like leaving everything the same, having them come out in the Christmas, you know, stuff, but then like changing the song?
Yeah, my
like,
wife
the whole
was
point that ruins the joke almost, that they're doing like a risque dance to like this old school.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, it totally just spells out right away that it's going to be something untoward. Yeah, my wife pointed out that the Katie character doesn't even get to save the performance.
Right.
Like, it just shows the aftermath on social media, which I don't know. What's your grade for this, Cody?
Yeah, so I'm going to give it a C+. I think it just, you know, like I said, I don't think it's bad. I do think that it's funny. I do think that I do agree with you that I think the Janice and Damien characters are maybe a slight upgrade, if not, you know, on par. But I think that everything else feels like an inferior thing. And I mean, like, what you know, that movie had such a great, I mean, there's a lot that's great about it, but that Rachel McAdams performance is just like really fantastic. And I feel like this, you know, the movie hinges on how good she is in the original, and this one, you know, doesn't get that from the way that this character is presented.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe this is just progress and things falling out of favor, but like, you don't ever feel like you legitimately start to feel sorry for the Renee Rapp version of this character. Like, like, she gets put through the fucking ringer. Yeah. And it's not some evil bitch getting her comeuppance. It's just somebody who's kind of bitchy. And it just doesn't feel the same.
Yeah.
A C+ for me too. I agree with everything you said. I just don't, I don't know anyone who would pick this version over the original who was alive to see the original, or at least has been seeing the original, you know, in the last 20 or so years. I mean, like you said, it made us a huge star out of Tina Fey. It made a huge star for a little while out of Lindsay Lohan. I mean, I assume this set the table for 30 Rock, the success of this. Anyway, C+ for both of us. Let's move on to our last movie, The Beekeeper.
I'm a beekeeper to protect the hive. Sometimes I use fire to smoke out hornets.
This is a multi-million-dollar operation, asshole. Okay, so you can't come up here white knighting shit. Will you stomp his ass out, please? I got it. You fucking get him. You fucking get him.
Bet you feel really proud of yourself.
I regretfully did not get to see this movie. I ran out of time. They didn't have a screening for us here, Cody.
Yeah.
But you did, and I've heard a lot of things about this movie being bonkers, stupid, fun. But tell us about The Beekeeper and what you thought of it.
Sure. So, Jason Statham January movie, like what could go wrong, right? And directed by David Ayer, who, I think is a talented guy. I mean, I think I really liked End of Watch. I think that's his best movie. I think that there's talent in his lesser movies, even if, he's on a streak of some stinkers right now. But, essentially you get a plot where it starts off with Felicia Rashad plays like an older woman, and who essentially gets preyed upon by like a scammer online, and basically has all of her money taken. And Jason Statham is a retired like agent of like a secret society of people called the Beekeepers, who are there to protect the hive. But then he also literally is a beekeeper on her farm.
Seems a little on the nose
Yeah.
to get your retirement job.
Yeah. And so basically he vows to sort of get revenge and make the people who are in charge of this pay. And it's all led by Josh Hutcherson, who plays like a tech bro, who is like the leader of this company that is like in charge of the scam. And in his tech bro character, let's just say that this conspiracy goes all the way to the top. And
oh fuck, for real.
And so Statham vows when he goes rogue to wipe everyone out so that he can again protect the hive. So Jason Statham basically only talks in bee metaphors the entire movie, and the movie kind of escalates into like it takes a turn which you can probably see coming as you're watching it, and then it actually goes there, and it's really stupid. So yes, stupid fun. I would say yes. You get your typical violent action scenes. It is a rated R movie, so you get a lot of F-bombs, you get a lot of broken limbs, you get a lot of gunfights and stuff like that. I like the sort of douchebag Josh Hutcherson performance here, where he is playing like a douchey tech bro, as I said.
I just reminded me of how much I like that performance from like teen heartthrobs of the past. We mentioned American Fiction. Is it Adam Brody that shows up in that as a douchebag? The film director.
Mm-hmm.
I just love that genre of performance. Like, here's a guy that was on some like teen hit, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Now he's playing the douchebag villain in a movie.
I do love that arc. Yeah, for sure. But at the end of the day, this movie is just like stupid fun. It is somehow at the same time like better than I thought it was going to be, but still not great. And I think that's about what I need from this movie, right? I need it to be watchable. I need it to be entertaining. I need it to contain good action, and I need it to not be totally intolerable when it comes to
I see what you did there.
I need it to sting.
Oh,
yeah.
Honey, what would you give? What grade would you give this movie, honey?
I'm gonna be honest and give it a C+. I mean, it's enjoyable, but I can't like deep down in my heart recommend it. But look, if you're looking for a January fare, there are worse January movies out there. I watched one earlier this week that we didn't cover. But yeah, I mean, C+. If you're a Statham fan, I think go for it, because I do think that it delivers on that kind of thing. I do think that For me, Statham is the best when he's operating with a little bit of humor underneath it, and I feel like you don't really get that here. It's very straightforward, action star kind of thing. But it is silly. It is dumb. I actually do like the idea of like someone getting revenge for old people getting obviously and clearly scammed. It's a cool idea, but then when it starts to devolve into this like stupid storyline, it kind of loses me a little bit.
Wasn't that the whole reasoning behind January 6th was old people getting scammed?
I don't know, but I'll explain something to you in a little bit. I want to spoil the movie for you, but I don't want to do it on the show. So
okay, all right, that's gonna do it for this week. Next week, Cody, we have I know one that we have for sure.
Yeah, we have ISS next week. That's the one wide release. I watched that earlier this afternoon. And then I don't know. We'll see what else comes up. There may be like a streaming thing or something like that. But I know that Origin opens up limited in certain areas.
Yeah.
I know All of Us Strangers opens up here in San Antonio, so we could do a full review of that. So we'll figure something out to pair with it.
All right. If you want to reach us, you can email us at podcast@cinesnob.net. You can find us on Twitter @cinesnob, Facebook cinesnobnet, youtube.com/cinesnob. You go listen to our top 10 of 2023 show. I think it was a good show. Don't watch it because it looked like shit for some reason. Go listen to it instead. Anything else before we go, Cody?
No. It's good to be back in 2024 and back. It's January, but I enjoy getting back into the swing of things after the awards push, where it's a little bit less pressure filled and we can kind of just kick back and relax and try to enjoy some things and
watch movies at home instead of going to the theater.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about the Cowboys, Cody.
It's part of the fandom.
All right. On that note, I'm Jerrod Kingery.
I'm Cody Villafana.
Thank you for listening to the CineSnob Podcast. To read reviews, interviews, and more, visit cinesnob.net. See you next week.